Hi guys, today I want to discuss some intriguing ancient carvings from Mesopotamia. The winged genies holding both a handbag-like object and a pine cone. Many reliefs display a stylized sacred tree in the center. There are all kinds of speculations on what these items are and their true purposes, especially the mysterious handbags. They have been called the handbags of Anunnaki or handbags of the gods. One theory is that the bag represents the cosmos. The semicircle of the bag's stripe signifies the hemisphere of the sky, while the square base indicates the earth. Some researchers argue that the sacred tree the genies are touching was in fact cannabis. Therefore, maybe the bags contained hallucinogenic drugs. Some suggest that if the Sumerian gods Anunnaki were ancient aliens that visited the earth and taught humans technology, as Zecharia Sitchin proposed, then the bags and cones might be high-tech tools that assisted these powerful aliens to perform wonders. Some claim that the pine cone is related to the pineal gland where the human soul sits. There is also the historical explanation that these bags were actually buckets, and the bucket and cone duo were used in Mesopotamian rituals. In the following video, I will provide you with my theories on this topic. What these curious objects might really be, what were in these bags, and what the Sumerian tree of life was. Let's get started. To begin with, I want to clarify that the handbags and cones are not held by the powerful Sumerian Anunnaki. Originally, the Anunnaki consisted of 7 major gods described to be heavenly deities with immense powers. These gods did not carry bags or pine cones. If the Anunnaki were truly ancient aliens, then their power didn't come from the bag or cone. The winged genies that held the bags and cones are Apkallu, who are semi-gods and are not even considered minor gods in Mesopotamia. Apkallu means sage or expert in Akkadian and is associated with wisdom. The Apkallu are depicted as fish-man hybrids, bird-headed or human-looking beings with wings. They are referred to as the 7 sages, and their duty was to introduce knowledge and learning to humans as teachers and advisors. Beside the handbags and cones, Apkallu also held other things, such as sprigs, which are small stems bearing leaves or flowers, scepters with diverse heads, a string of beads, and even a baby goat. The bag and cone are not always paired together either. Sometimes the genie would just carry a bag, with the other hand making a gesture. If the handbag represents the cosmos, then what meanings did these other special items reveal? Why would a significant symbol of the cosmos be linked to less important semi-gods instead of the Anunnaki? Thus, I find the cosmos hypothesis implausible. To make an educated guess on what exactly these genies were doing with their bags and cones, we need to have a contextual understanding involving correlated historical eras. Why? Because the meanings and scopes of Apkallu might have changed over the lengthy history of ancient Mesopotamia. For about 5,000 years, the region between the Euphrates and Tigris experienced the rise and fall of multiple interconnected civilizations. The best-known ones were the Sumerians, Akkadians, Assyrians, and Babylonians. Countless concepts, stories, myths, and words were shared, inherited, adopted, combined, and repurposed amongst these cultures and neighboring ones. The earliest known civilization of Sumer was established 6,500 years ago. The earliest known record of Apkallu was in the Sumerian poem, the Epic of Gilgamesh, written 4,100 to 3,200 years ago. Yet the large, elaborate carvings of the winged genies were from the Neo-Assyrian period, dated to 9th century BC, about 2,900 years ago. So, there was at least 300 to 1,200 years separating the first Sumerian documentation of Apkallu and the Neo-Assyrian carvings. A lot of things could have happened in such a long time, and the idea of the sages or Apkallu likely evolved as well. With this in mind, let's check the various contexts and eras of these genies. I'll start with the later reliefs since there is more data. In the Neo-Assyrian era, most, if not all apocalys appear in one of three scenarios. Sometimes they are the corners and gates of the room along with the protective spirit Lamassu. Sometimes they flank a sacred tree, carrying a bag while holding a cone either approaching or touching the flowers of the tree. Other times, they place the cone close to the king or another person. Records around this period indicate that apocalys was involved in apotropaic rituals. For example, the sage Adalpa's name was used to invoke power in exorcism procedures. The handbag is referred to as a bandidu, meaning bucket in Akkadian. The cone is called maululu, which means purifier. Many historians believe that the bucket and cone were used in rituals whereby a cone was dipped into a bucket to sprinkle liquid on the king, his courtiers, and palaces to purify them. That's why the apocalys figures are shown near doorways and in corners of rooms, because these areas were thought to be where evil spirits lurked. Plaques of the apocalys were also used in homes to ward off evil. Therefore, at the time of the 9th century BC, apocalys were deemed as protective spirits who sprinkle liquids to bless people and places in order to defend them against evil. Now, what about the reliefs of the mystical beings standing by the sacred tree? Were these genies using the bucket and cone to perform rituals to protect the tree? That's a strong possibility. However, in this relief, the two apocalys seems to be tending a young tree with no ritualistic items. Moreover, there is a long tradition in Mesopotamian art of representing figures facing a central plant. For instance, the Temptation seal, dating from 2200 to 2100 BC, depicts two seated figures with a tree in the center. Here is another seal imprint of two beings flanking a tree from the 15th to 13th century BC. Then we have this unusual seal from the 12th to 11th century BC, a bird-headed apocalys stepping on a branch, grabbing and twisting another branch. Such actions doesn't look like it was meant for protecting the tree, right? What was the being doing then? Please note, this seal was made over 200 years before the protective apocalys at a later Assyrian king's palace. It's quite possible that these earlier artifacts were more accurate portrayals of the Sumerian description of the apocalys. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the 7 sages or the apocalys were said to have built the walls of the city Uruk. They surveyed the foundations and examined the brickwork. The wisdom of the sages at the much earlier Gilgamesh era was more practical if not down to earth. This fits the original concept that the mythological 7 sages or wise men were the teachers of humankind. In this case, the genies tending trees or even grabbing a tree branch might have had utilitarian purposes. Such behaviors probably had a direct connection to what type of tree it is. Even though the symbols of the sacred tree changed through different periods of Mesopotamia, there are plenty of clues pointing to a single tree species. The Neo-Assyrian sacred trees have numerous versions and are mostly stylized by a series of flowering nodes or leaves with crisscrossing vines, though the centerpieces are consistent. The outer decoration of flowers or vines might vary due to design preferences, but the core information never changed. Look at the single unbranched tree trunk and the dramatic crown with fan-shaped fronds. It must be a palm tree, and not just any palm tree, but a date palm. Other reliefs presenting the Assyrians' life from the same period frequently exhibited date palms, which are easily recognizable from their hanging fruits. Date palms are in the king's garden, where he was surrounded by servants. Soldiers and horses were standing under date palms, and people brought offerings in date palm groves. The interesting thing is, the much earlier seals also show date palms. The tree in the Temptation seal is a date palm with its fruits. The apocalys was possibly grabbing the frond of a date palm. The unbranched, spiky trunk, the erected fronds on top, and the dangling fruits are signatures of date palms. So, the sacred tree of Mesopotamia probably has always been a date palm. Most of us are not aware of how quintessential those date palms were to the Mesopotamians and their way of life. There are very good economic and symbolic reasons why for thousands of years these ancient people articulated date palms in their art and clay tablets. Date palm has been the most prominent native species to Mesopotamia for millennia. In the 5th century BC, Herodotus wrote that palm trees grew in great numbers over the whole flat country. This region was the domestication center of the earliest crops, which included the oldest cultivated fruit, dates. Evidence suggests that humans consumed wild date palm fruits in the Near East 8,000 years ago. Date palms are dioecious, which means they develop as either a male or female tree. The males produce no fruit but pollen from their flowers, which would wind pollinate the female trees that will then produce the fruit. The Sumerians discovered the dioecious nature of these trees. Once they realized that one male palm produced enough pollen to fertilize 50 to 100 females, they replaced most males in their groves with females and started hand pollination by at least 3300 BC. Hand pollination collects the male flower's pollen and applies it manually to the female flower. This is still practiced today in the Middle East and North Africa, in a way very similar to what people did on ancient plantations. Some growers don't even maintain any male plants, as male flowers are available at local markets at pollination time. The artificial pollination method was a turning point in Mesopotamian agriculture since it enabled abundant crops while economizing on water, land, and labor. Date palms were and still are highly desirable. They start to bear fruit on year 5 and can live to 150 years. A mature tree produces up to 140 kilograms or 300 pounds of dates per harvest season. The fruit has high sugar content, which provides energy, and they are resistant to spoilage. Long before refrigeration, dried dates could keep for years, making them invaluable for households and travelers afar. They can be turned into honey by boiling and straining the fruit. In fact, the biblical phrase, land of milk and honey, refers to honey from dates, not bees. It was also one of the field crops that could be harvested all year, even during the dry season. Besides the fruit, every part of the date palm could be used. The leaves and timber as building and manufacturing materials in Sumerian baskets, sandals, homes, and temples. Fibers and thread came from the palm tree for mattresses and rope making. A. Leo Oppenheim, one of the most distinguished Assyriologists of his generation, stated in his book, "No other fruit tree has received similar attention. Only in groves of date palms did the garden play an important economic role in Mesopotamia. The date palm was the only essential fruit tree in the region." Date palms were crucial to ancient Mesopotamians and truly deserved their prevalence in regal art exhibitions, or the potential title, the Tree of Life. Artificial pollination of date palms helped to ensure the world's first city-states and empires to flourish in the cradle of civilization. Back to the winged genies Apkallu standing by the trees. The ones that held the cone to the flower of the trees surely looked like they were pollinating the female flower of the date palms. Considering that pines, including Turkish pines, are not native to this hot and arid area, the so-called pine cones, in all likelihood, are not pine cones at all. If you examine the reliefs closely, the cones held by Apkallu resemble the male flower of date palms, which is also in a cone shape. Nowadays, many date palm farms still use experienced workers to hand apply pollen. Sometimes they shake male flower bundles on the female flower. More often, they place the collected pollen into a cloth, a bucket, or a bag. The workers may carry rolled-up bags or buckets that contains pollen while climbing up the trees. They then dab cotton or other appliers in the pollen bucket to fertilize the female flower. On that account, the bags or buckets that Apkallu carry near trees probably contained, as you now know, pollen. The Apkallu is the bags and cones by the tree's flowers, were displaying the method of artificial pollination. The outer embellished parts of the trees might also represent the protective covers for young offshoots and baby plants. In order to improve the new date palm survival rate, it's customary to use wired nets, hessian wrappings, or tents of date leaves to protect the fragile baby plants from harsh climatic conditions, like sun and wind during the first summer and cold the following winter, and against animals. The seal of the abacalu twisting palm leaf might be a picture of trimming a palm tree, which is also a routine procedure. So, the abacalu, the 7 sages in the Sumerian time, 4,000 to 3,000 years ago, were portrayed as wise teachers to pass knowledge onto humans. They supervised city wall construction and possibly created artificial pollination. In and around the 9th century BC of the Neo-Assyrian period, their role switched to more ritualistic and apotropaic. Despite this diversification, the significance of date palm farming persisted, and the relationship between the sages and artificial pollination was preserved, as we see on these beautiful reliefs. During this later Neo-Assyrian era, the winged genies became protective spirits too. When they were placed near doorways, corners of rooms, or by a person, they performed apotropaic rites by sprinkling holy water or other liquids to purify places and people. For this purpose, their buckets were likely filled with water or certain liquids. As a bag or a bucket, it's designed to carry all kinds of things. Pollen or water, it really depends on the specific jobs these sages were supposed to do. It's fascinating to witness how historical elements evolve over time and what actually lives on unchanged. Although we don't create art for artificial pollination anymore, this ingenious invention is still thriving and benefiting us in modern times. As I wrap this up, I want to point out that there is potentially something else which also gets preserved from these ancient reliefs and is still practiced today: the ritual of sprinkling water to purify people. This tradition has also spread to a much greater population. The Torah, the Old Testament of the Christian Bible, explain how to take a hyssop, a plant, dip it in the water, and sprinkle it as part of a Jewish ritual. Most are familiar with the Christian aspergillum, which is used to sprinkle holy water on a person in liturgical services. Did you know that Buddhism and Hindu ceremonies do this as well? These rituals are almost identical, albeit the sprinkling instruments and plants are revised to fit local preferences. It's well accepted that the use of holy water for sacred rituals predates Christianity. Christianity originated in the city of Jerusalem, which is on the Fertile Crescent and connected to Mesopotamia. It's not far-fetched to propose that this sprinkling ritual actually rooted from ancient Mesopotamia. Could the flower sprigs carried by the abacalu be the predecessors of the Christian hyssop? So much has changed, and so much has remained. Just like the ancient sages, today's bishops and master monks are still performing similar rituals that may date back to the earliest civilization on Earth. Aren't we lucky that we still have these invaluable ancient artifacts that convey messages and tell wonderful stories to us from thousands of years ago? If you have any insights, please leave me a comment. If you like my video, please subscribe to my channel and share with others. You can also support me on Patreon, which is a monthly charge, or on Buy Me a Coffee. I appreciate your support. This is Curious Being. I'm Tina. Thanks for watching and see you next time.